Kia ora everybody and welcome to the Good Day Matrix. My name is Daz and I'm here with a genuine force of nature here from Aotearoa, Dr. Lee Mathias. Thank you for having us in your home today. Lee is the founder of Birthcare. She's the co-founder of Lab Tests. She's the director of Tent House and Pictor. To name a few, she has been on the board chair of Counties Manukau DHB, the Health Promotion Agency and Unitec. She is currently the chair of Medicines NZ and has been on many boards. She's a member of the New Zealand Hall of Fame for Women Entrepreneurs and in 2013 became an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit. Lee is a mother of 4 beautiful children, an academic, is how she likes to describe herself, an incredible coach and mentor to many, and is undoubtedly a woman of incredible integrity. And I'm just so excited to be here, and I truly would back you in any of the change that you're trying to make and all of the things that you're trying to drive here and advocate for. It's pretty magical what you're doing. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
And thank you for having us in your beautiful home. We at the Good Day Matrix talk about 5 pillars of wellness, and we'll just slowly weave through those today. So body, mind, identity, community and environment. And we believe it's not just focusing on body or just focusing on mind, and that they all interconnect and they all interlink, and we need to be focusing wider on how we take care of ourselves and where we're connecting. So we'll start with body and we'll weave our way through. So do you have any daily rituals or activities that you like to do that are like non-negotiable for you?
Well, pretty much walking the dog, obviously. So, and I often say to people that, you know, if you want to get your steps up, get a dog. So already this morning I've done more than 5,000 steps. And I'm lucky enough that half of the month I can do that on the beach. And quite often it's a virgin beach. So you literally, well, we are literally the first people on the beach that day. And it's absolutely fabulous just being able to, I guess, commune with nature. Yeah. I'm not sort of that sort of person, but it is good for, it's good for the mind as well. And I do bar. So been a bit slow over the COVID period, and so on Monday I go for a big assessment of my bar capabilities. Always been a dancer, and I guess I prefer the rhythm of dance to just doing Pilates or just doing yoga or jazzercise or all those other things that I've done in my life. So I think you need a bit of cardio. I need a bit of cardio as well, which is probably my main exercise. And then of course the garden. Yeah. So, you know, weekend times, my steps can get up to sort of 20,000 just by being in the garden, just walking to and from and, you know, doing stuff, climbing trees. And although I get told off about doing that now.
I was going to say.
Mostly do things on poles now, yes.
That sounds even funnier, Lee.
I thought about that once. I said to my husband, let's get a pole put in.
He would have been like, I'm going, I'll be back soon with it. Don't change your mind. It's been my favourite part of the day. How I know how busy you are, and what I listed didn't even do you justice, but how do you make sure you do take care of yourself on those busy days with having such a full plate?
I actually have to compartmentalise what I do. I mean, when my first husband died, I have 2 of my children, by the way, and 2 stepchildren, and there were another 2 stepchildren.
Wow!
I never thought I'd end up being in such a blended sort of family. I thought, because I was always sort of pretty straight, and to end up with this crazy family life. But yeah, I've had to compartmentalise because, and that just takes organisation. So I actually have to have confidence in other people to look after my children, to make sure they were picked up, to whatever. And that might have been friends, that might have been, you know, people I employed to do that or whatever. And that way I can actually focus, absolutely focus. But in latter years, so the youngest is now 32, so
Wow.
in latter years, it's really, I would do things at certain times of the day. So I often work at night. I often work until between 9 and, 8 and 10 probably can be just as productive for me as 8 and 10 in the morning. Other than that, I'm actually a morning person. And then I have a sleep in the afternoon. No, I don't.
Jealous.
Really.
You own that. Own that if you do
Yeah,
that.
well, I do. And since COVID,
You have
I
to.
tell you, it is an absolute sleep. It's like dead to the world, and it's awful. Absolutely not manageable at all.
Yeah. COVID has
So that's the secret to getting stuff done,
Yeah.
is making sure I complete exactly reading the summary of something, being prepared. I guess my motto is always be the best prepared person in the room. That's the most important thing, so that you don't lie awake at night thinking, oh God, what's going to happen tomorrow? You know, I haven't done this, I haven't done that. No, you just get prepared, and then you sleep well. And
and
good.
then you're prepared for any opportunity that comes because you've
Yes.
got everything front of mind and ready
Yes.
to go. Yeah. I love that you said that you work at night, because there's so many people that are so like, they're like, no, it's impossible that you can be productive past this time. And I'm a night person too. Like, I put the kids to bed and I can be incredibly productive for a good 2-3 hours.
Yes.
Undisturbed and just nail it. And other people are like, no, like that's not the right thing. You need to be doing that at this time. I'm like, well, it works for me. So it's really nice to hear someone who is doing all the things you're doing and successfully and still taking care of yourself,
Well, I
knowing
think
that works.
that's the secret for everybody. You've got to actually find what works for you.
Yeah.
You know, it never works for me if the house isn't done before I start to study. The great procrastinator.
Hey, there's good things in procrastinating too. So with your garden, this is going to lead us beautifully into mind, but how important is gardening for you, both for body and for mind?
Well, it is that whole, and it is communing with nature. Just being surrounded by the green, just being rested, just being productive, but not actually working. It's not work for me. And as you can see, this garden is sort of low-key. It's not a formal garden. It's most of it's bush. The other half of it is actually down the cliff where it fell. So some days I can just wander around with a pair of secateurs and pretend I'm gardening. And that's equally as good.
Yeah.
Or I can just, deadhead. Or other days I'll go full out and say, right, today we're going to take down this tree, we're going to do this with it, or I'm going to plant this, or whatever. So it is important, and it's creative.
Yeah.
Whereas my creativity all my life has been about creating healthcare systems and, creating ways of keeping people excited about working hard and that sort of thing. And so most people don't see that creating healthcare systems is actually creative, but it is.
It is.
So gardens are creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also a learning journey too. Like, you get, like we were talking about the word curious before, like you get curious about different things.
Yes.
Like all of a sudden you might see one bird come into a certain area and you might be like, oh, I didn't realise that would happen. You get curious and you learn more about that bird and what would have brought them in and what else they might need and in your ecosystem that you're developing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I was on a chat with you a while ago. You were talking about, it was sort of right as COVID hit, I believe, from memory. And you were talking about the need now to think differently than what we've done in the past. So if you've got certain distribution channels or certain ways you've done things or ways you've gotten things, that we need to get outside of that and really use a business mindset to think differently, to create new opportunities and also have more than one option to get the things that we need.
Yes.
And what we're talking about, when I heard that, it likened it so much to wellness for me. Because like we talked about with the pillars, you can't just rely on body being your wellness because you've got all these other things that are going on. So sort of talk us through how important that is to think outside the box and also how you keep your mind in a state to think outside the box.
Oh, well, if you take take it from a business point of view, what has really changed is we're no longer doing just in time. So just in time, that whole movement through the 80s and 90s, and you really didn't want to carry too much stock. You didn't want to invest in anything more than you had to invest. You wanted your contract to actually say, we'll have it there when we need it. Now, we can't do that anymore.
No.
And you certainly can't do that with your own wellness. And people say to me, oh, you're always on about us about eating well and not smoking and doing that, because I'm the health promotion advocate. And you say, yeah, because wellness is sort of a lifelong thing. You don't actually say, oh, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol, sugary drinks, etc., when I'm 60. You should never have had that stuff in your life. And I'm not a teetotaler, I enjoy my wine. But you see, I don't drink spirits. And that's probably because I don't really like spirits. But you've got to do everything in moderation. And it's no good getting to, especially going into older age, and saying you're going to change these things. Because it doesn't, life doesn't work like that. Your investment has to be much younger. And I would like to see a lot more investment in children and how they look after their bodies, because I don't think that we're seeing a lot of that now at all. Whereas, if you go back to the olden days, we had the old pyramid and you got taught it at school and then you got reinforced at high school, and by the time you went out in the world, you pretty much knew what was good for you and what was bad for you. Whereas none of that stuff happens now, and that's a pity. I'd like to see some, regulation on sugary drinks. Got a discussion going with somebody at the moment who should be in power to be able to do something about that. And he wants a tax, and I don't think taxing is right. I think you just regulate and say, right, no sugary drink, no drink with X amount of sugar is going to go on the market. We did it with RTDs.
Wow.
I wanted 7%. This is when I was with the Health Promotion Agency. I wanted 6%, and we got them down to 7% max of alcohol. So, and that all stemmed from my seeing a son come in with a little 4-pack of RTDs. This is a few years, this would be 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And they had 14% alcohol in them, and they worked out to be 99 cents each. And I'm thinking, and we wonder why we've got a problem. So you can regulate, and actually, are you stopping choice and all of that sort of stuff? Well, I should have some choice about how much healthcare dollar is going to go into that sort of care later in life. That's the way I look at it. But it is about investment, and that's why I like the concepts of social investment. But when you come back to the individual, it's the same thing. Don't think you're going to change it when you're 60, because it doesn't work like that.
And it's also habit-based as well.
Absolutely habit-based.
You can say, at 60 I'm going to change, but you have built these habits for 60 years. There is no way you are going to make a change. Unless there's some dire, maybe health scare, and then you're like, oh shit, better give that up now, but too late.
And the damage is done.
And so you work with a lot of amazing humans across all of the different boards you're on and businesses that you're a part of. How do you use your nurturing skills within each of those environments to support the people you're working with?
Well, I sort of use the word care with trepidation, but it is about caring and being respectful of other people's cultures and opinions. And actually a lot of my doctoral research is around the opinions of others. So, every opinion has a value. It might not be used in the decision that you're going to make today, but it does have a value in some way. In fact, just interviewing at the moment for somebody who's immersed in Taha Māori to come onto the Medicines New Zealand board, because that board is made up of industry leaders, and many of whom have been in New Zealand for a year. Their turnover is quite high. And the reason that I want somebody there with that immersion, although I'm pretty good, obviously, I've worked in, born and bred in Aotearoa, grew up in worked in South Auckland a lot. you can't really give the perspective if it's not part of you.
Yep.
Yeah. So the caring thing, it's about respecting where other people come from and in what they're saying and how it affects them in life. I think the other thing is, because I'm a nurse, I often recognise what's happening around a board table much more quickly than others. In fact, it often amazes me how some people don't see that somebody's in trouble or, obviously got some personal thing happening in their life and that they need to be treated carefully.
Yeah.
I don't think that you ever need to speak to people in a way that is demeaning or putting them down in any way. And, you know, I've worked with people like that. One example was a chair that I worked with who told the entire senior leadership team that he didn't trust them. Oh. And so I spent the next 6 weeks getting this team back on board again. Because, you know, you've got to actually say, I trust you. And that's the other thing that my research was very clear, that we keep going through these crises of trust. Yep. And that's Honora O'Neill, by the way, Baroness O'Neill. Yep. She writes heavily on the crisis of trust. But we keep going through these crises, but actually, I'm going to trust you to edit this and take out the bits where I've looked silly, or you got my wrong side, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, especially in the health sector, where I'm dealing with people who may be the best in the world at what they do, I have to be able to say to them, I actually trust you to get on and do what's best for you. Yeah. And even with normal members of the public, you know what's best for you. And if you don't, can I help you make that decision? Yeah. Can I give you information? Can I, education, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But we're much better off, and that was my criticism about the managing of COVID, was that we weren't trusted to do what we wanted to do. You might want to take that bit out.
No, it's good to have, again, like I said, perspectives and different experiences, and you were right in the thick of all of that understanding within COVID and what was actually going on. We kind of got filtered versions, I guess, or more scary, messaging to be really mindful, but it's really good to understand from different people with different experiences, what was going on. It's awesome. This leads us beautifully into identity and knowing ourselves, because a lot of the time when we're in environments we react a certain way, we may not actually understand why we've reacted that way, why we had a short fuse to that, why it triggered us in different ways. So we really believe knowing who you are, knowing where you've come from, is a really, really important part. So for identity, where have you come from? We know you've said Rotorua already, but sort of give us a bit of an idea of your whānau's journey.
Well, essentially, I'm mongrel Pākehā. And I say mongrel because, most Pākehā are a mixture, just like many Māori actually, are a mixture of various histories, mostly English. And that English line, we've got a direct trace back to before 1066. Wow. So I've got a wonderful sister-in-law who does all this genealogy, and it's absolutely fabulous. So we've got that wonderful line, and that's the good thing about having British ancestry. The moment the churches came in, they kept the record, and all those records are there, which is amazing. And some other countries don't have quite that record. I have some Scottish, obviously. Every New Zealander has some Scottish in them somewhere. And I have just only one grandfather not born in New Zealand, and he's Welshman.
Me too, my pop's Welsh.
Yes. So pretty much there's probably a little toe full of French in there, but then that's, again, most British people have a little bit of French. And only a little toe full of Irish too, so not a lot of Irish in there at all, So that's who we are, but my kaupapa is quite old. One grandfather, quite early, the 1830s, quite early. but the rest are sort of 1842, that big influx that came into the Taranaki. They were all on there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how have you come from Rotorua to Huntly to Auckland?
Oh, well, I've never lived in Huntly.
Oh.
No. I just had the Birthcare there.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yeah, so Rotorua, born and bred, went to school there and enjoyed a wonderful childhood. There was nothing in my life, you know, people get up and give these great terrible things about what happened to them and how they were survivors and all the rest. And I sort of think, actually, probably I could count, you know, 4 or 5 kids at school who had it tough. But growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was pretty affluent. I mean, we all lived in miserable, well, we didn't live in a cold house because my father had put in the central heating. And my father was a draper.
Oh, wow.
And he put the central heating in with his best friend who was a hairdresser.
Outstanding.
But I'm the product of 2 ex-servicemen. So my mother here in New Zealand at Te Rapa, you know, the big whatever they had in Te Rapa, but she could always mend an engine in a motor, so she did a lot to do with that. And my father served right from 39 to the last boat home, 1946.
Wow.
So, and I often look back and think about how they shaped my my dedication to democracy and freedom and people being able to say what they want to say as long as you don't hurt somebody else. That sort of principle. My mother, I remember with her eulogy, and I talked about her frustration at being given all this freedom for 5 years and quite responsible jobs, you know, really responsible jobs near the end of the war. And then it was like, nope, that's it. You're going home to be a wife and we want you to make babies.
Yep.
And she was a bit, she was more than upset about that. And she was heavily, obviously we were well off, she was heavily involved in philanthropy and, you know, running goodness knows what in Rotorua. And I used to watch all this, but underlying there was this sort of resentment. And when the first wave of feminists came out, I remember her saying to me, at last it's starting to happen. And then of course I'm a second wave feminist.
Yep.
My father was in he would have loved a farm when they came back from the war, but they'd all gone. And so he had to go into the family business, which was family drapery, and he had a certificate to fit bras. He was a very handsome man. So all the women in Rotorua thought it was quite nice if you got youngie in to fit your bra. A crazy life. Well, they couldn't get staff, you see. So it was and so when feminism came along, I was allowed to do anything, but I was not allowed to burn a bra because that was bad for business.
For business.
So you see, that underlying business thing has always been there in our life. I have, all of my siblings have been in business on their own account for years, and 3 of us pretty successfully. One brother very successfully. He was a meat trader and then moved into IT, which seemed to be the most amazing thing. And but he just ran it from a business perspective. This is what businesses need, and so this is actually what we're going to provide. Yeah, so that's where I came from. So business was always around the dining room table, basically. And that's why I've ended up with this funny combination of public sector and private sector involvement in the world. But I've loved it because what I've learned is that in the health care systems, you really don't get to change much from the inside. You have to change it from the outside. So I would go to and fro, recognise what needed to be changed, like the maternity services, and then move to the outside, get a public sector contract, and then run. And that changed the face of maternity services in New Zealand, really. It became acceptable. I mean, Huntly was actually the first private sector contract for maternity services in New Zealand. And then Auckland, and then a few others started dotting around the country.
You did an amazing piece of work to become Dr. Lee Mathias, and it was around the P-class sailor and resilience, and so I'm not going to even try and explain it, but can you tell us about that and how important it is in terms of, you know, the environmental factors, so things that are outside of your control, and then working with a difficult piece of would you call it machinery, engineering, whatever you want to call the boat, and actually having to still be successful with outside challenges as well. So sort of talk us through that.
Yes. Well, the P-class is a New Zealand designed boat. My husband still sails the bigger version, a Zephyr, actually, sitting in the garage. But the P-class has a sail area that's too big for the boat. I know nothing about designing boats. But they're dogs to sail, you know, like a little snubby nose. And but once you master them, it's like, I've got this. Yep. I've really got this. But it takes you 2 or 3 years. So between the ages of, say, 9 and 12, so you're pretty little, to actually get your head around how to sail the P-class. It is a mark of resilience. And I often put that down to why so many, when you look at so many successful New Zealand business people, most of them have actually sailed, usually a P-class.
Wow.
So you look at all the people, they've all sailed and they've all mastered the P-class. And that's quite a claim for me to say, but when you go and ask people, they will tell you that. Yeah. It's quite interesting. And what we do to kids, in Auckland, I don't know whether you know A-Boy, but A-Boy is that thing that sits out in the middle of the harbour by Bean Rock out there. And we would send these kids from Kohimaramara, sail right out to A-Boy, around major shipping lane of the country, big ships everywhere, sail around that and come back again. It's quite a long way. Yeah. And the kids would get back and they'd be crying and they'd cry. And then they'd look up at you and say, but I did it. And that's the fundamentals of resilience. And I would get every kid in a boat of some sort. I want to see every kid in a waka ama team, in a yacht, in a canoe, in a kayak, in a whatever. Because it's about managing the water, hopefully the wind, but certainly the other weather. And if you're working in a team, that's even better. Yeah. So it's about that solid grounding of having to get some very basic life skills sorted out when you're a kid. You don't get that sitting behind a screen. And, you know, essentially Tender's a digital business, but you don't get that behind the screen. And that concerns me a little bit. You do get a lot of competition behind a screen, and I love watching the esports and all of that sort of stuff. But you don't get that emotion and that sensitivity about reading people and so forth. And as I said before, I mean, I read people because that's what nurses do. Yeah. Somebody said to me the other day that nursing wasn't a knowledge business. And I'm thinking, oh no, where have you been? What do you think nurses do? You know, they have knowledge and the sensitivity, where you've got to put the two together and actually make sure that you know, people are where you want them to be. Yeah.
And that you're monitoring what's going on, those unsaid things, particularly in nursing.
Yes.
So you are a part of amazing communities and have been a part of many more amazing communities. But one thing we find, it doesn't matter if it's knitting groups or rugby clubs or a walking group that you're a part of, being a part of something and being able to contribute and feel valued in that group is something that we take for granted. And I think COVID helped us to understand how important those different groups were to actually go and connect with. But sort of tell us, obviously we know about Birthcare and the Aunties, so tell us about the communities that you're a part of and how important it is to be contributing and encouraging others to contribute to that as well.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because of the Blue Zone research has been very important for me in recent years. So my main communities have always been my professional communities over time. So first of all, very involved in nursing, very involved politically in nursing, led the first nurses' march down Lambton Quay. My parents were horrified.
Without burning a bra.
Without burning a bra. Yeah, and so that's still a fairly strong community for me. The midwifery community is still quite strong for me, even though I'm not actually a midwife. I'm a maternity nurse, but not a midwife. And but they are, because they think quite differently. They think very much about partnerships and very much, and I like the way they exercise the academic side of their community really quite well. I have a small academic community, so I'm still a member of the Global Pētā Forum.
Wow.
Which I attend every year. Last 2 years has been online.
Yep.
So doing a whole 12-hour conference for 3 days overnight has been a little bit challenging, but you know, you get to record it. You know, it's accessible later. And I quite enjoy when people sort of inquire about you. I also have a LinkedIn community which focuses on the governance side of things. Yep. So again, an academic community. And then more locally, my community is obviously my immediate community. So Woman Up the Road is doing the reforestation of the school bushwalk.
Oh wow!
So we meet every second weekend, and it was in a mess. So we're only just at the getting rid of the weed stage, and we've been going since Christmas basically, which is good. But it's a small community here. But I guess I'm sort of coming back to more local communities. I'm heavily involved in a political party, and I do policy. So policy is my thing. And because I have big picture, this is what this is how it links in with the country, and I do social and housing and health policy in there. So they take up probably 2 nights a week on calls.
Yep.
And of course then there's the Aunties. And so the Aunties has actually been going for 10 years, and I've been in there since, I suppose, about 3 months.
Yeah.
And met the founder online on Twitter. We were called the Twitter Aunties originally. Met her on Twitter. I've met a lot of influential people on Twitter. It's been good. And at the moment we look after about 32, 33 families. And they are at the extreme end of family violence and deprivation. I think we've only ever had one woman go through the system who was not at that extreme end. It was certainly at the extreme end of the violence, but there was financial support from her family. And when I say how disturbing it is, can I give you a case study? I'll give you the case study of Kay. It's not her name, Kay. And Kay is a Māori woman who was adopted into a Pākehā family. She's 55, with 2 other Māori children and then 2 natural born children. And when she was 12, she was sent to one of the Māori girls' schools, and the fees were paid for 4 years, and she never went back to that adopted family again or saw them again. Every holidays, she would just be sent off with one of the other girls' families, which is a very Māori thing to do. Wow. But it wasn't until she got to the age of, I don't even think she was 16, she might have been 16, and the money ran out and she couldn't stay at school anymore.
Oh,
So here's the first failure of the school, and actually my first husband was on the board of that school for many years, so I sort of feel a little bit responsible. The first failure was, instead of saying to Kay, hey, why don't you go and be an enrolled nurse or a whatever, where there was accommodation attached and there was a camaraderie that was going to support you, they sent her to live in a boarding house in Ponsonby. I mean, it's horrifying. So, of course, she got into alcohol and drugs. She was pregnant sort of fairly soon after, and life just spiraled. And she spent time in prison. And finally, a judge said to her, I'm not sending you to prisons. She liked going to prison because of the support systems that were around. It's what we hear a lot of. And the judge said, no, you're going to go to X, a very upmarket drug and alcohol centre, since closed, where she spent some time and gradually got her life back on track. But in the meantime, I mean, she had had terrible relationships and, you know, she'd lost a son for periods of time and whatever. So she now at 55 is not well. She's full of arthritis, as in rheumatoid arthritis. She can't work because her hands just don't move, and she's very slow moving. She can't bend. And if you follow me on Facebook, you would have seen the saga of finding a bed that was high enough for Kay.
Wow.
But she's been put in a state house, which she thinks is a palace. It's probably the worst home I've ever been into. And I've been into thousands of homes because district nursing and maternity nursing and all the rest of it. This would be the worst. And not a stick of furniture.
Wow.
She didn't have a bed. She'd been in this house for 5 years, and until February, I think it was, when she accepted that I was going to bring her a bed and we were going to get it high enough that she could use, she'd been sleeping on a couch.
Wow.
And she's full of arthritis. So you see, all I see is the health thing, and actually if you're sleeping on a proper bed with that support at night, you will feel better, and of course she is now. But it took 4 months to get her into the bed. Because it was in a bedroom.
Yeah.
And she'd obviously had terrible experiences when she was a child. So one of the other aunties had to go and take the door off the bedroom so that she couldn't be locked in the bedroom. So we're dealing with multiple. And I admit these are at the extreme end, but we have 30 families like that, and it takes years. So the head auntie, Jackie Clark, just works really on getting these women sorted legally. That's probably the biggest role.
Yep.
And she does a lot of court appearances and court work. And then getting them to the stage where they will go and have professional counselling. But we have to pay for that. There's nothing in the system that allows us to access. I think we can get 2 or 3 counselling sessions, but these women really need therapy, you know.
Long term.
So that's the complexity. The Aunties does take up a lot of my time. And when I say they have nothing, they have nothing. I mean, like zilch. They'll have 1 set of clothes and, 3 or 4 children with 1 set of clothes. And so you're scrambling to find beds and bedding and clothing and food. And the food is another thing. We're rather famous for turning down 2 more pallets of tomatoes that were due for their expiry date, which is fine. Normally you would accept a pallet of tinned tomatoes. But these women can't get their heads around opening a bag of chips to feed their kids, let alone creating a meal from scratch out of a can of tomatoes. It's that severe. In fact, I gave Kay just the other day, a packet of pre-prepared pasta, tortellini, and a jar of sauce what we call Friday night takeaways when you live in the country.
Yeah.
Because you boil the one, you heat the other,
Yep.
you tip them together, you scrape over some parmesan. And she took the packet and she said to me, what do I do with this? So that was extravagant food for her. So it is we have hundreds of families in New Zealand who are at that level of understanding how to feed themselves. And COVID made that very, very clear, that people couldn't get through 10 days of isolation from what they've got on their shelves.
No.
So they couldn't make a cake, they didn't have enough breakfast foods, they didn't have enough bread in the house. They very, very basic stuff. They didn't have the, emergency box that most of us have got from the earthquake, where we recycle the can of spaghetti, They don't have that. And it was just, let alone fresh protein, that just wouldn't be on the card. So I think that's another major issue for New Zealand, and where my political work is sort of leaning on that social investment side, which of course is a Bill English thing, and where we started with Aunties Manukau DHB, we started the first social investment board, where we identified 1,800 families in Mangere alone who had touched 7 different agencies. So that by that I mean education, justice, corrections, WINS, and Aotearoa, and what else? Police, and I've missed one. Health.
Yep.
And got all those people in one area together, top skimmed the funding so that we actually had one board, one lot of funding, but 1,800 families. I mean, it was like...
Where do you start?
Where do you start? And so we've got some major problems, social problems in this country that will probably become my next community. But you don't stop that.
No.
Yeah, when you slow down, like I'm supposed to be slowing down, when you slow down, you don't stop being concerned about how other people live and how the inequity that we have in what should be God's own.
Yeah.
It's not hard to grow stuff here. It's not hard for us to get along. We've got very few problems in this country that are not our own making. Yeah. So that's community, but really important with the Blue Zone stuff, which I promote quite heavily. So, Blue Zone is, should I do it for the camera?
Go for it.
Blue Zone is a major piece of work that was done actually on longevity. So this could lead into the books quite well. And it was done on longevity, and it looked at 7 communities throughout the world and who are noted for their longevity. So there's a group in Japan, and there's a group in Mediterranean areas, and there's a group of Dutch immigrants in California, Utah, of course, and so forth. But what to get it into a one-pager, it's basically a free movement, so walk as much as you can, basically. You can ride bikes if you will, but walk if you much. Vegetables, plants land is the next one. Wine at 5. So that's to do with with digestion and the aperitif.
Wow.
So we grew up sort of an aperitif was people would sit and have a drink before dinner, and then they would have dinner. So my phone call before was about the clover ferments, which was one of my company of women. I also have company of women that I'm very involved with, and Global Women, which I'm quite involved with. But so they're ferments, and it's about digestion. The modern food, processed food, we're not made to digest. And then number 4 is family. So keeping up with your family contacts. And the main one is community. So the community comes before the family, which is something that we probably hadn't recognised in such a defined way before. Yeah, so being part of that community. So that research underpins a lot of my social policy work. Yeah.
In different environments, some people can be strong in integrity in this environment, but then they come into this environment and they're a little bit more murky on their integrity because some things just have to get done or the boss wants it done a certain way. So even though it's not in line with how we're feeling, we can often sort of act outside of our values just to get things done the way they should or we think they should be done. So what are your non-negotiable values in any environment that you're in?
Well, obviously integrity. You know, that's very important because I don't get asked to do things if my integrity gets challenged. But I'd go back to my own doctoral research and I came out with accountability, probity, and I don't think that we are good enough at our probity in New Zealand. We're very trusting. Okay, trust is probably the biggest one. And if I think that somebody, trust and transparency, if I think that somebody is feeling that I don't trust them, then I will actually try and broach that and say, I'm sensing that you don't think that I trust you. I'm going to say, look, you're qualified to do this, and this. I actually expect you to get on and do it.
Yep.
I know that you can do it, you know.
We brought you here for a reason.
And then the last one, of course, because I work in the health sector, is duty. So we have this big thing between that conflict between duty to the organisation and duty to the patient.
Yep.
And that's something that I often have to help people work through. To say, you know, I had this awful experience with Pharmac a couple of years ago, and this woman in Pharmac, we'd been explaining a particular medicine, and the expert from Australia had said, I know that by putting this package of medicines together for oncology patients, gastric oncology patients, I know that I can now guarantee these patients 5 more years of life. Right?
Wow.
He had that much research behind him. And this woman just sort of turned and she literally shrugged her shoulders and said, oh, some people die. And I said, I've never heard anybody say that. That health sector people don't say that. They certainly don't say it in a meeting with an international expert sitting there who's seen hundreds of people die.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's that, and she was talking about it from a rationing point of view. And of course, she hadn't realised that I was part of the key rationing piece of work in the country, which was to do with renal diseases and dialysis in the 90s. And, you know, where we actually had to say, we can't take everybody onto the program. What are the rules going to be? Well, you actually had to be moribund not to actually be accepted onto the program, to be honest.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what it did was that it started the conversation about when it was right and not right to keep people alive. Yeah. And I think that's an area that we don't go into. So that duty is multifaceted, you know, and duty of the organisation. I mean, there are rules. Yep. You know, we have laws. Yeah. For that reason.
For a reason.
And the place to change it is in Parliament.
Yep.
And so I think it's actually just drawing on that level of experience. I mean, you know, I was like everybody else. I had the imposter syndrome for many years until one day, one of my supervisors actually, and I said to her, well, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And she said, you, of all people, she said, you are the expert. And from that day, I kept saying, actually, yeah, I'm the expert here. But it takes many years of maturity to be able to do that. Yeah. And, you know, I'm quite an introvert. People say, oh, you're an extrovert. No, I'm quite an introvert. I'm the INTJ. Yeah. I'm the person in that top right-hand corner of the, can't remember whose thing it was now.
It's going to come to me.
Yes. And I'm the INTJ, and I'm so introverted. And I know on the tent board, 2 of us are introverts, and 3 are extroverts. And the 3 extroverts are out there in the whole board meeting, chat. And then the other introvert and I come out and I say my bit from usually the health and social side, and he says his bit from the financial side, and that's the way we go. And I don't think they're realising it yet, but gradually I can see the thoughts going through the process. How come we do all this talking, but actually we always do what they want to do, or what they propose? So being an introvert is okay, because I'm happy in my own. Introversion isn't about needing to be on your own. It's about being happy being on your own.
Yeah.
And I could be out here forever as long as I had, food and wine and the dog and the husband.
And the husband. Your dog is beautiful. So is your husband. We'll say that too. Sorry, I'm going to say both. I love that. I think it's important to have those conversations about, like, even sitting in meetings when you've got introverts, extroverts, and every different personality, how you facilitate those meetings so messages are heard. Because often you're at board level in those meetings, so obviously you are there for a reason. Some team meetings, sort of in the next sort of couple tiers down, there are the same voices who are being heard, and there are the same voices who sit there very quietly and then leave. And how we're facilitating engagement and also valuing everyone's contribution. And not everyone has to speak if that's not their thing, but how else can we engage them or include them? Is it that you provide information ahead of time of your thoughts on something? That's a conversation we're having with a few leaders at the moment. Just, if you're working with these different teams and they're going, they don't like talking, well, how else can we make it feel comfortable, like what's actually going on that we can change, but how do we facilitate it better and be really aware of our people, which is right back to the front of our conversation.
Well, chairmanship is very different than directorship per se, and the good chairman will to use the work of Richard, terrible name's gone from me, the Canadian, being the conductor is very much part of whereas as a director I'm the consensus builder, most definitely. People ask me to go on boards to be the consensus builder, and it'll be, we need so-and-so because he or she's got a specialist skill, they know the sector, but we cannot get that cohesion around the table. Being a chairman is about making sure that every opinion has value, and it's that whole value thing, and being able to explain that. And I think that's probably why we had so much difficulty in getting diversity at the board table. And a lot of people thinking that diversity was about women and colour and so forth, whereas really it's more about thinking differently.
Yes, diversity of thought.
Yes, absolutely. And I've always thought differently. And I know sometimes people look at me at the board table and they go, really? And then I will explain or use an analogy and so forth, and I can get them across the line. There is still the male-female thing. Men are still aggressively out there pushing themselves, and you just want to say, shut up. What you're saying is not relevant, but you can't do that. I do manage a board meeting from the time people get their papers.
Okay.
And I might ring somebody and say, you've got your papers, you'll see in item whatever, I'd like you to lead the conversation on that. So, make sure you've done extra work.
Yep.
And here are the points that I think are, because I want to influence it, obviously. Here are the points that I think, or it might be the outcome for the organisation needs to be guided to a certain end, but get them to, so they will think about it. Yeah. And then go back before the board papers, and I say to the officers, they present these stupid board papers, and you think, what are we doing here? So I get them to write a board paper as a reflection on what they've done and what they need to do, so that it's their work, not something that's written for somebody else. I'm a great believer in you do something once. So with your monthly report, you reflect on something and then just put it into a format of a board paper where you want to an outcome or some sort of resolution, and we'll use exactly the same documentation.
Wow.
Because we're too busy.
Yeah.
The DHB people used to spend weeks preparing the board papers.
Yep.
And some of your members didn't even read them.
Now, you have obviously been in the health system a long time, and you're also in that political system as well, and I imagine things are quite hard and particularly bureaucratic and slow to make change or get things working in a way that you could potentially see functioning really well for the country, let alone for our health system and our people. So I imagine that takes quite a lot of patience. But sort of walk us... No, because I don't. I can tell you I don't have patience, but how do you continue driving to get support for Aotearoa and make change when I imagine there are quite a lot of roadblocks that come along?
Well, it's really just taking people with you, and it is hard work. The Birthcare contract, for example, for Auckland, took us 18 months to get.
Wow.
We took over an 8-bed unit, so completely uneconomical, and we were running that for about 18 months before we got, I think the Auckland Regional, Northern Regional Authority it was at the time, they gave us $2,000 a month towards, it didn't go very far,
no.
but that's what they gave us, and then we got a contract. And then, of course, once we got the contract, because it was free to the woman, it just was, we could then get into business. It did take time.
Yeah.
But then we got that change on the outside, and then the idea was to try and get some change on the inside, which was actually about breastfeeding. It's actually about the most basic thing. So I still think that breastfeeding is the major public health issue that we have in this country. If we had 98% of our women breastfeeding for 6 months, we would not have the health issues that we have. And it's quite hard to do that. Yeah. So the change going forward, well, if there's a change of government, there will be change, obviously. I don't know what that's going to look like. We needed to get rid of DHBs. I was very vocal about that because I would sit there I was an elected member for Auckland for 9 years and an appointed member for counties.
Oh, wow.
So I had all of the experience to say, this isn't working. And at Auckland, 3 of us did all the work. 2 of us were nurses.
Yeah.
And 1 is actually actively involved now. So 3 of us did all the work, and others would not even be starting to comprehend the issues. Yeah. And Auckland is a $2 billion business. Counties was a $1.4 billion business.
Shivers.
And you've got people who just were never going to get their heads around that. As much as you wanted to hear what they had to say, the enormity of that was just
overwhelming.
And understanding the connectedness, that if you have one service, attached to that one service, there will be diagnostics. There will be, as in radiology and that sort of thing, there will be diagnostics as in labs, there will be social work, there will be, community service, GPs, they're all in there, and you've got to get your head around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've got a lot of room for change. We are probably the worst off we've ever been. And yet we've got more money in the system than we've ever had. By 2024, there will be $24.2 billion in our health system. In 2017, it was 15.2.
Oh my goodness.
That's the increase.
And then we look at where we are. So.
And it's about discipline. When half of your employees are professionals, more than half probably, it's probably about 72% are actually professionally qualified, they all want to make their own decisions.
So how you do that as well, isn't
and
it?
I remember one, and there are certain rules in big healthcare organisations that you don't break, and I remember one where the guy after me came in and he got rid of all of the charge nurses. And the first rule of running a big hospital is make sure your charge nurses are on side. Your nurse managers are the most valuable.
Yeah.
They keep it going at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I talk about the 3 a.m. syndrome. You know, if you don't understand what happens at 3 a.m. in a major hospital, don't think that you're going to try and manage it. Because you have to understand those tensions and, you know, that the guy who is in the theatre sawing off a long bone from some major trauma and there's a surgeon next to him sewing up a gut or something, and there's an anaesthetist trying to keep the patient alive, and the nurse manager who's running the things trying to find enough gear and people to be in there helping them. If you don't understand those tensions, then the likelihood of being able to do a good job is very low.
Yeah.
And that's one of our problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which comes right back to what we talked about, wasn't it? Trying to make decisions when you don't actually know what communities need or what groups
That's
need.
right.
If you haven't been in there or a part of
Yeah.
it, you can't know what solutions you can bring.
Yes. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yes, the days of being a director or certainly chairman of an organisation that you really don't understand, preferably that you have work done at some stage, but that you really don't understand, those days are long gone.
Yeah.
You have to understand in far more detail because of the speed. The number of people who's taken appointments sitting around a board table who have never seen the business fascinates me. Oh, I've got a public company directorship, but I've never been to XYZ factory. It's just down the road. Well, go and have a look.
Yeah. Understand
Talk to the
what's
people
going
on the floor.
Get off the high horse and just understand.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, governance is a cradle. I mean, it's funny, it comes out like a cradle, but if you imagine, governance is actually this bit at the bottom here, and then you've got management, and then you've got the clinician and the patient, right? And the thing that you're all trying to do is make that decision between the clinician and the patient the most economically effective and efficient that you possibly can. It's not about having a board member at the top and working down. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
And then around the outside, of course, you've got all this context of politics and, you know, various ministers making decisions randomly. So it can be very frustrating.
Discipline was a good word that you used, though, I
Yeah.
think, to, you know, because I thought patience, but discipline is probably actually what it is, and being measured, I guess, and being able to take the breath and being like, oh, it's the same challenge, okay.
Yes.
And deliver a succinct message of
Yeah.
change
And of course,
hope.
as you can imagine, as you get older, you see the same
Yeah.
come around. And you say to people, this is what will happen
Yeah.
if you go down that track. Oh, but we haven't tried it. I said, yes, we've tried it. We tried it in, you know, 84 and 92 and 98 and 2002. I mean, you just watch it.
Oh, it's madness. Which moves us in nicely in the time into portion disorders. It's the last thing that we talk about, and it's that I feel like it's regardless of life stage or age or experience, we all seem to have the same barriers with time or same issues with our time, whether that's how we distribute it, our management of it, or our feelings of lack thereof. But sort of talk us through challenges you've had with your time, either currently or in the past, that you've had to overcome or find ways to manage.
Well, probably in my heyday, it was about not having enough time to do everything. And so, yes, some of my hobbies and things that I wanted to do actually didn't get done. I love the theatre, I love dance, and I just didn't get to go. I was more often sitting watching kids sail or at cricket on a Saturday morning or whatever. And cricket takes, you know, it's a long game. So that in that situation, it was either work, it was family, house work, and being organised. So on a Sunday, I used to cook 4 meals for the week.
Wow.
So I knew that Monday to Thursday, at least we would be right. All of those school stuff, you know, the bags full of, I used to put them out on the floor. So there's this school bag, there'd be the schoolwork stuff, there would be the sports stuff, there would be the after school stuff, and they'd all be out for the whole week. And so everybody knew where they were, and then it was your responsibility to get it in your bag and get to school.
Yeah.
And so it was just that organisation, I
Yeah.
think. I always do two things at once. That's the motto of mine. Why do one thing at a time when you can do two? So if there's, ironing to be done, I'll be listening to a podcast or watching the news or doing something else. Although my best thinking is done ironing.
Wow. Why do you think that is?
Here's my theory, is that you get very high reward with ironing, right? It all looks all beautiful. You've done it for the week. This is in the days when I had business shirts and all of those sorts of things, right? You've done it for the week. It looks neat and tidy on the shelf. It's all perfect, but you haven't had to think about it.
Yeah.
So it sort of clears your head. It's a bit like occupational therapy.
Yeah.
That's my theory, and some of my biggest solutions have come while I've been ironing.
I'm a do two things at once person too. People are like, how could you do that and that at the same time? Just, I don't know, it works for me. Are there any ideas or strategies or systems that you could recommend to other people to try? Because you've obviously mentored and coached a lot of people over the years of getting better in their systems and processes and leadership. So are there any things you could suggest people to try?
Well, for me, it definitely is organisation and compartmentalising. Don't be worried about your child at school while I'm paying you, $200,000 a year to run a business. That's not how it works. And it's harder for women because they still carry the load for childcare. But, and that comes back to trust. Trust your child to look after itself at school, even at quite young ages. Trust them to actually be able to come to you and tell you that they've had a good day or a bad day or whatever. Trust the teachers. And I know that sometimes some schools that can be hard, but yeah.
It's a great one. Now, talk to you do a lot of things that bring you joy, but how important is it to make the time to do those things that bring you joy and fill your cup and sort of restore you for the next challenge that's coming?
It's not overwhelming. It's not overwhelming. I mean, I love doing the flowers. I love being in the garden. It gradually, because you feel better after it and it looks good, or that gives you pleasure, and so you want to do it again, obviously. But we all get joy in different places, and I think that's the thing. People say, I write the odd little paper for LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of other stuff. A couple of other academic papers on the go, but I don't do a lot of other stuff nowadays. But that gives me a pleasure. I won't say it's joy, it gives me pleasure. Joy is more, and I guess this is moving into that sort of that young old phase. Joy is more about seeing the smile on a grandchild, and none of them are my grandchildren. Neither of my sons have had children yet. Hopefully they'll make babies soon. So the grandchildren are my husband's grandchildren, but no, they give me a lot of pleasure. They're good.
Right, I have some quick fire questions for you. 3 things that made you smile today.
Oh, a little fella with the red hair in town saying hello, Robbie. Good morning, Robbie. He's not quite there yet, so he's 18 months, 20 months, that sort of age. So that's always a good smile. That's always a really good one. I think there is a beautiful clematis up the road. Absolutely divine, just on the corner up here, which is lovely to see. And as we were on our walk up the road this morning, a kerry-roo was about this far away from my ear as it flew up the road.
Amazing.
So, those are the sort of things that make me smile.
That's so cool. Favourite books?
Well, I do books quite in a funny way. So I like to actually make it a project. So last year I did Gertrude Bell, and so read her book, which is The Desert and the Phone, and then a biography of her, and then some research about the changes in the development of Iraq and Syria, which was just so fascinating. And of course, if they'd done what she wanted them to do as the architect, we probably wouldn't have had the issues in the Middle East that we've now got.
Wow.
Just fascinating. And then I watched the movie, which is called Desert Queen. So that was last year. This year I'm doing sort of gods and Troy and stuff. And that started with Pat Barker's books.
Yeah.
So the last one was Women of Troy, which was really showed what they, if Troy existed, what they think the woman's role would have been described all those years ago, and how many of them were slaves and how many were concubines, and the various services that they had to provide. So so my reading is sort of a bit of a project.
I love that though. That's a brilliant way to do it.
Yeah, so that you don't just sort of read one book that's sort of a novel.
Yeah.
You sort of back it up with stuff that the historians will say this probably happened, or this is the god that they were praying to and meant this, that and the other thing. And mostly it's Greek mythology.
Yeah. 3 favourite smells.
Oh, roses is the first one. There's no doubt about that. That would be and then probably. Did you know not being able to smell the roses is a sign of early onset Alzheimer's? No. And that's where Stop and Smell the Roses comes from.
Wow.
So even years ago, people had recognised that there was a relationship with smell and dementia. Interesting, hey?
Wow.
I just learnt about that the other day. So I keep smelling the roses.
Yeah.
And then I suppose it would be some food. I think food. Bread.
Fresh bread.
During lockdown I made bread, like everybody. I have a bread maker. It's back in the cupboard now. But bread and bacon.
Again, there's nothing like that in the morning when you've got a beautiful piece. Yeah. What makes you laugh?
I mean, the silliest things make me laugh. My husband has a very funny sense of humour, and I just laugh. I like the Goons and those sorts of English humour. They make me laugh. Littlies make me laugh. The things that babies do. I mean, especially toddlers who are learning in life, and you just have to laugh at the way that they are going, that they test. You would understand this, and they test and they test and they test. I mean, that's so.
First job?
My first paid job was adding up the receipts, checking the receipts from the shop. So it was quite a big shop. And the sheets were done in 2 pieces, and everything would be written up and tallied up. And my job was to check that tally. Pounds, shillings and pence, what you'd like that. I can still add up in pounds, shillings and pence. And I did that from, I guess, 11, 12, 13, that sort of age group. Yeah. And then once I went to high school, it was behind the counter.
Step up.
I would do the haberdashery.
Oh, cool.
So I counted buttons and measured lace.
Never the bra fittings?
No, I did do bras later.
Yeah.
Later on, like 17, last year of school, did the bras then. And we also had fashion then too, which I quite enjoyed, yes. So, but the buttons and the lace.
Go-to pick-me-up songs?
Oh, it has to be jazz, Diana Krall, that sort of jazz, really. Although anything classical, really. But yeah, Female jazz singers get me,
Yep.
especially the ones who can play at the same time.
Yes.
I'm quite challenged instrumentally. I just think they're wonderful.
Yeah. 3 things that you're grateful for today. We'll do a 360 of that.
Yeah, being alive. You know, I wake up to that every morning. We have had the most fabulous. We live in this country where there is just no excuse for people not having a good life and being able to live their best life if they are disabled or compromised in any way. Yeah, we really are lucky. I'm so grateful to have found my Robbie, the family.
Hobbies.
Well, obviously, the garden is a big hobby. The other big hobby is that I collect stamps.
Nice.
I have books over there that are full of stamps, really. So I'm now at the stage of swapping out poor quality versions for. I only do New Zealand.
Yeah.
Poor quality versions for better quality versions.
Wow.
And I'm only minus about 4 or 5 from the years that I do.
Yeah.
So 1840 through to 1956.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazingly. We used to ask what does a lazy day look like, but now we ask what does a recovery day look like. So one of 2 ways you can look at it.
I don't know. I feel as though I'm on holiday most of the time. It's really quite funny because this was the holiday place. So a lazy day is really pottering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'd call it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that lazy day I might actually do quite a lot of work. I might clean a cupboard.
Yep.
I might, something sort of innocuous. It's not planned.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess that's the thing.
Yeah, there's no bound.
Just doing something that's not planned.
Yeah, not bound by time.
Yes.
Qualities you love about yourself.
Oh, I find that too
I
hard.
always get this, but
you get the
I
too
sit in the
hard to
silence and I wait.
I guess my resilience and determination. You know, people do describe me as being the dog with a bone, but it's so important that we stick with something and get it resolved. So that is one quality. I like. I think I now like my sensitivity. You know, I could still cry at television ads.
Yes, I do. You're not alone.
And you know, Mr. Neat and Tidy in the garage, he laughs and laughs. I said, what's sad? You know, but I can spend. So that's it. And it's let's not lose our sensitivity, our humanity.
Well, that is the end of our quick bite.
Good.
The end of our kōrero
Nice.
today. That was
Thank you.
amazing. I can't wait to hear everyone's feedback about this because there's so many amazing parts to this and also so many things we can help with and get more informed about. And I think that's a really, really, really important thing that people need to start getting more curious about what's actually going on here in Aotearoa and how can we actually get involved to support and help make change.
Well, I wish I'd used that word curious because that's the thing is come and be curious.
Yeah. Well, thank you for watching and we'll see you again soon. Ka kite.